Hello to my subscribers. Today is June 24th, 2024. Today I'll be reading Chapter 2 of Daniel Hopsicker's book, Welcome to Terrorland, Muhammad Atta, the 9/11 cover-up in Florida. This chapter specifically talks about the apparent attempt to assassinate George W. Bush on that day. Let's get right into the chapter reading. 2 hours before terrorist hijackers began crashing airliners into the Twin Towers of the World Trade Center, 4 Arab men in a white van pulled up to the guard gate of the hotel George W. Bush was spending the night at, the Colony Beach Resort Hotel on Longboat Key in Sarasota, Florida, and launched an attempt to assassinate the President of the United States. The attempted assassination had very likely been coordinated by terrorist ringleader Muhammad Atta, just then passing through the airport security 1,000 miles away in Portland, Maine. Several days before Bush's arrival in Sarasota, according to eyewitnesses, Atta had been meeting with co-conspirators at a Holiday Inn barely 2 miles down the beach from the hotel where Bush would be staying. 2 hours before the assassination attempt was launched, Secret Service agents guarding the president in Sarasota received a dramatic pre-dawn warning of an imminent threat. That 2 years later, Americans have never been told anything about these events has illustrated how both seriously U.S. officials took the attempt and how far they've been willing to go to keep a tight rein on information. Whoever said the first casualty of war is the truth said a mouthful. We discovered the assassination attempt while sifting through local news coverage in the aftermath of the attack. Acting on a friend's cynical dictum that the only real news you get is when something big happens is in the first 24 hours before the cover-up is put in place. We had been scrutinizing news accounts from the confusing early hours and days following the 9/11 attack. We were looking for big news stories that inexplicably and immediately died without explanation or follow-up. It's called suppressed news, and we hoped to discover a few nuggets. But we didn't just find nuggets. We found boulders. Amazing things were happening in Sarasota during the pre-dawn hours before September 11th. Events which we discovered had surfaced briefly in news reports before disappearing, never to be heard from again. We did our job by piecing together 2 separate news reports from Sarasota, one a local television newscast, the other a town newspaper, that together led to an inescapable conclusion that during the intrigue which was swirling in Sarasota before dawn that day, terrorists were looking to kill George W. Bush. The first report stated that a pre-dawn warning of an imminent attack had been delivered to President Bush's Secret Service detail in Sarasota and aired on the Sarasota ABC affiliate's evening newscast. The warning of imminent danger was delivered in the middle of the night to Secret Service agents in Sarasota guarding the president, reported Monica Yadov of ABC's Sarasota affiliate, and it came exactly 4 hours and 38 minutes before Muhammad Atta flew an airliner into the World Trade Center. The second story is of a chilling eyewitness account of the attempted assassination in progress. It came from Longboat Observer, which literally covers the waterfront upscale Longboat Key, where Bush spent the night before the attack. At about 6 a.m., September 11th, Longboat Key Fire Marshal Carol Mooneyhan was at the front desk of the Colony Beach and Tennis Resort as Bush prepared for his morning jog. From that vantage point, Mooneyhan overheard a strange exchange between a Colony receptionist and a security guard, the paper reported. A van, occupied by men of Middle Eastern descent, had pulled up to the Colony stating that they had a poolside interview with the president, Mooneyhan said. Neither of the 2 reporters knew of the other's reports, but both had covered different angles of the same story. A concerted attempt by 4 Arab men posing as journalists to gain access to President George W. Bush at 6 a.m. on the morning of September 11th for the purpose of ending his life. Here's how it went down. Zainluddin Omer, a Middle Eastern native residing in Sarasota, contacted Sarasota police on the middle of the night to tell them a friend of his who had made violent threats against the President Bush in the past had just shown up and unexpectedly in Sarasota's ABC's Yadov reported. The man who Omer warned authorities about was identified in the Sarasota police report of the incident only as Gandhi. Omar said Gandhi told him he was in town to get a friend out of jail, but Omar had heard Gandhi make violent remarks about Bush in the past. And since the president was in Sarasota at the time, Omar feared his friend might be in Sarasota to kill the president. The warning was initially given to the Sarasota police, who called in the Secret Service. Within hours, Secret Service agents were searching an apartment in Sarasota. Turns out Omer was right. They arrested 3 men, all from Sudan, and took them in for interrogation. The questioning lasted, according to one of the three, Fathel Rahman Orner, for 10 hours. The police came and arrested me and three other people, Fathel Rahman explained in the ABC interview. Rahman said he couldn't help the Secret Service. So you know nothing about the president coming to Sarasota? Asked Yadov. I know nothing, he replied. I know nothing about Osama bin Laden. Nothing like that. Moving quickly, the Secret Service next swooped down on the local beauty supply store, whose owner had been fingered by Omer as being a close associate of Gandhi. The owner of a liquor store next door watched as agents raided the place. Very shortly after the World Trade Center attack, we noticed 4 or 5 agents swarm the building next door, explained Greg Breslick, owner of North Trail Liquors in Sarasota. We always thought there was something strange about that establishment. We saw a lot of people go in there, but never saw anyone come out carrying any beauty supplies. Agents detained and questioned the owner of the beauty supply store, a Muslim named Hakim. Hakim, too, had disturbing information for the Secret Service about Gandhi, reported Yadov. He told agents Gandhi was a member of the SPLA, or Sudanese People's Liberation Army. This group is a Christian and animist guerrilla group fighting the fundamentalist Muslim government in Sudan. Whoa, Sarasota, Florida seems a little far afield from sub-Saharan freedom fighters. What could they have been doing there? Pricing retirement real estate? Maybe they had been receiving covert training in the swamps, which is a Southwest Florida tradition. Bay of Pigs invaders stormed the beaches here, practicing for Cuba, a local sheriff told us. And why would operatives of a guerrilla organization fighting against a government of Islamic fundamentalists closely allied with Osama bin Laden want to assassinate, of all people, George W. Bush? It didn't make sense. But once you admit the possibility that there exists sub-Saharan Christian animist guerrilla fighters in white-bread Sarasota, Florida, anything seems possible. We were able to confirm much of ABC reporter Monica Yadov's account. The arrest of the Sudanese men made National Wire Service reports on the day after the attack. The Associated Press said the Secret Service interrogated 4 Sudanese men in Sarasota after getting a tip that the men intended to harm President Bush during his visit to the city. But the men taken in custody had been released, and the incident found to be unrelated to the attacks, said the AP story. The Secret Service also dismissed the report, saying the warning was coincidental to September 11th. A special agent in charge of the presidential detail in Sarasota told reporter Yadov that the president was never in any danger and that the connection to the SPLA and the warning that the Secret Service got before the terrorist attack was all just a coincidence. For good measure, the FBI weighed in, poo-pooing the story to reporters asking about the significance of the warning. In the vague and wary way the government spokespeople seem to have patented, FBI spokesman Sarah Oakes said nationwide the FBI has received over 200,000 such tips, with more than 5,000 of the tips coming in from Tampa office alone. The explanation would have to do. No one would have anything more to say. Another mystery averted by your friends in public service. When your credibility as an agency has already been shredded, as the FBI's has, there's not much left to lose. Their denial made no sense, but it served to stop further investigation into the pre-dawn warning. Stopped it on a dime. Until reporter Yadov went looking for Hakim, the owner of the raided beauty supply store, and discovered that Hakim's beauty supply store wasn't there anymore. Hakim was missing too. He left in something of a hurry after being released by the Secret Service, Yadov learned. Gone. No one knew where. And Hakim wasn't the only witness to disappear in Sarasota. Zain Labdin Omer was missing too. The man whose warning of imminent havoc had been right on the money was now unavailable for comment. He quit his job and left town, just ahead of reporters' questions. Hakim and Omer joined the swelling ranks of 9/11 missing witnesses. We like to think of them as all being on vacation together somewhere, maybe on an island of lost witnesses. Some of Omer's friends could still be found, however. One told Yadov, Omer got in trouble with the law. All I know is he can't leave town. So you think he's still somewhere around? She asked. On camera, Omer's friend shrugs and says, should be, if he's still alive. It's a chilling moment. If Omer's still alive, why wouldn't he be? Where are the missing Sudanese men today? The Secret Service doesn't know. Yadov checked with the INS. Was Omer being detained? The INS wouldn't say. Their responses sounded a little cavalier, especially from people who take their job very seriously of protecting the president, unless by being part of a deliberate cover-up they thought that they were protecting the president. But 2 years later, but if it was a cover-up, how could you tell? One sure way, we figured, would be to look for signs of witness intimidation. If authorities were actively discouraging people with first-hand knowledge from talking, then you could be pretty sure that there's something rotten in the state of Denmark, or Florida. Was there evidence of witness intimidation? Yes. The eyewitness to the incident at the front gate of Bush's hotel who came forward, Carol Mooneyhan, was the Longboat Key fire marshal. He had been milling in the lobby of the Colony Beach Resort at 6 a.m., along with Secret Service agents waiting to accompany Bush on his morning run, when reporter Shay Sullivan of the Longboat Observer interviewed him about what he'd seen. Mooneyhan probably didn't know enough to dummy up. He was local, he was honest, he was a fireman, so he talked. And even though reporter Sullivan knew nothing about Yadov's corroborating report of an earlier pre-dawn warning, the savvy reporter immediately suspected that Mooneyhan had witnessed a foiled assassination attempt. Mooneyhan told the Observer that he had been waiting at the front desk in the lobby of the hotel when a white van arrived at the hotel's guard gate carrying 4 Middle Eastern men. The men in the van identified themselves as a television news crew with an appointment with the president, claiming they had a poolside interview scheduled with Bush after his morning run. They even asked for a Secret Service agent by name, Mooneyhan said. Secret Service agents at the guard station told the men to contact the president's public relations office in Washington, D.C. to schedule an interview. They turned the 4 Arab men away, but they let them go. In light of the attacks, Mooneyhan wonders if what he witnessed is related to the events of September 11th, reported the paper. So did the FBI. Sort of. That's very strange, an unnamed agent with the Sarasota field office of the FBI said, when informed what happened. Sullivan wrote he said he would direct agents to look into the matter. The FBI's blasé reaction wasn't enough to put the Sullivan off the story, however. He noticed that the ploy used to attempt to gain access to Bush had been used unsuccessfully just 2 days earlier by bin Laden operatives to murder the Taliban's biggest foe. 2 Arab men pretending to be journalists arrived to conduct an interview with charismatic Northern Alliance leader Shah Massoud on September 9th in Afghanistan. They used the ruse to gain an audience with the legendary guerrilla leader, who fought against the Soviet invaders in Afghanistan in the 1980s, and was now leading the resistance against Taliban rule. Masood Khalil, a Northern Alliance leader who was there, said, Shah Massoud said, "Okay, let's film." Then the journalists blew themselves up. Killing Massoud, one of the 2 journalists detonated a bomb hidden inside their television camera, killing their intended target and themselves. The blast almost claimed his life as well, said Khalili. I was screaming, and then again I saw the noise from the camera, then I saw the hand of the commander pushing me back, and I was unconscious. I'll never forget the face of my friend stained with blood, he told CNN. The Northern Alliance immediately said it had evidence that Massoud's assassination was the work of bin Laden, but not just Osama bin Laden. Many, like Massoud's companion Khalili, thought bin Laden had outside help as well. One thing we believe is that there was a global network of Osama plus some others who killed Commander Massoud. I believe they also said it was a global network of Qaeda and others who brought this catastrophe in New York, Khalili said. There's that global network again. Based on eyewitness accounts, the Sarasota assassination attempt was probably coordinated by Mohammed Atta himself, reported the Observer. If 3 eyewitnesses are correct, terrorist hijacker Mohammed Atta came to the Holiday Inn Hotel and Suites, Longboat Key, September 7th, the day of the media announced President George W. Bush would be coming to the area September 11th to speak at Sarasota School. Atta may have been there to meet a second hijacker. This hijacker's name was Marwan al-Shehi. A waiter at the Holiday Inn, Frank Boyle, said he was there when Atta didn't stray, he was there when Atta was there, and Atta didn't stray far away from the bar, the paper reported. Atta and his companion had both ordered from the hotel's $18.95 surf and turf buffet. They were just here, he said. I remember the face. When we visited the Holiday Inn Hotel, the bartender at the hotel pub, Darlene Sieverts, confirmed for us that Atta had most definitely been there. Mohammed Atta sat right on the bar stool you're sitting on now, drinking rum and coke, she stated. But I didn't have any real interaction with him. A bartender can tell when a customer doesn't want to talk, and he didn't. About 15 minutes after he arrived, he was joined by a second man who indicated that he didn't speak English when I asked what he'd like to drink. She continued. The second man motioned for Atta to intercede. But instead of ordering something for him, Atta asked for the bill. He left a $20 bill to cover a $4 tab. Sievert's recollections were echoed by other hotel employees who remembered seeing Atta dining in the hotel restaurant with a second man. In Sarasota, just a few days before the attack, Mark Bean, the hotel's assistant food and beverage director, identified the second man as Marwan al-Shehi. One need only compare what we just learned about the fateful morning of September 11th with what was reported to have happened to begin to understand how complete the 9/11 information embargo has been. The AP story, for example, made no mention of a van filled with Middle Eastern men attempting to gain access to the President Bush as he was leaving for his morning jog. They also neglected to report the pre-dawn warning of an imminent attack. Instead, Media accounts of that morning at the Colony Beach Resort sound much like this one from the London Telegraph. Bush awoke in the magnificent surroundings of the Colony Beach Resort on Longboat Key on the morning of his 234th day in office with a light, warm breeze slipping in from the ocean. After breakfast, Bush led by his Secret Service crew on a 4-mile run around the nearby Sarasota golf links, reported the paper. On his return to the colony, the president showered, changed into a lightweight dark blue suit, and still glowing from the morning's exertion, sat down for the first routine intelligence briefing of the day. It was 8 a.m. And we'll stop there, because it doesn't get any better. Although we learn that Mr. Bush was wearing a lightweight dark blue suit, they spare us the detail that he had been a target for assassination. In light of what happened in Sarasota that morning, the true beginning of what we know the 9/11 attack was probably Shah Massoud's assassination in Afghanistan on September 9th. Had the white van with 4 Arab men, the TV crew, gotten close enough to Bush, his fate would have been the same as Massoud's. That same morning, about 8 a.m., Longboat Key residents standing on the Sarasota bayfront waiting to watch the presidential motorcade go by noticed something unusual for Sarasota. A dilapidated van. Inside the van, he told police, were 2 men of Middle Eastern descent, screaming out the windows, "Down with Bush," and raising their fists in the air. What the shook Sarasota resident probably witnessed was the frustration of men stopped tantalizingly short of eternal access to more virgins than you can shake a stick at. When we finally reached him by phone, Carol Mooneyhan, the fire captain who saw the launch of a quickly hushed-up assassination attempt on the life of George W. Bush, told us, "I was visited by the CIA and the Secret Service after 9/11. I have a career to think about. I have to be careful what I say." And that was the last we learned from him, or that we heard from him. So that concludes Chapter 2 of Daniel Hopsicker's book, Welcome to Terrorland, Muhammad Atta and the 9/11 Cover-Up in Florida. Now, I want to cover an important related article by the Longboat Observer as well. It's titled An Untold Story of September 11th. In the 43-year history of the Longboat Observer, 2 staffers' involvement in the Longboat Keys connection to that horrible tragedy will forever tie them and the newspaper to history. Excuse me. This is published 2 decades and 1 day after the September 11th, 2001 attack. So let's get into it. 2 days after the Twin Towers collapsed, with smoke still sending signals of horror and dust choking all of Manhattan, Patty Colby, the receptionist at the Longboat Observer, called then executive editor Lisa Walsh, who was in their second-floor office. It was early afternoon. Stationed at the front of the office on Gulf of Mexico Drive, Colby served as our greeter and frontline gatekeeper. "There were 2 men here to see you," Colby relayed to Walsh. "They say they're with the Secret Service." Walsh remembers a hot flash rushing through her body. 2 Secret Service agents at the Longboat Observer, the paper whose police blotter is full of high crimes such as snakes in mailboxes and neighbors' dogs barking too loud? But like all of us, when we think back to that day 20 years ago, Lisa Walsh requires, the surreal scene and the 2 days after that like they happened yesterday. What occurred next can be called the most history-making story in the life of the Longboat Observer. As the U.S. and the world swirled in agony over the most heinous terrorist attack in modern history, 2 people at this little community newspaper on this tiny barrier island off the coast of Florida found themselves as key players in the Secret Service's hunt for clues. It has to be one of the more fascinating news stories in the 43-year life of the Longboat Observer. But here's the funny, odd part. Not much of it ever made it into print. Until now. The 2 blue-suited agents towered over Walsh, a petite 5'2" with her signature strand of pearls around her neck. She looked up to them, shaking inside with fear. "May we speak to you in private?" one asked. Walsh walked the hallway, escorting them to her office. She told herself, "I shouldn't be so scared. We didn't do anything." Her hands trembled. "How can I help you?" she asked as they took seats in their office. Where did you get the stories in your paper about the van of Middle Eastern men and the terrorists living in the trailer park?" one of the agents asked. He was inquiring about the city editor Shay Sullivan's news story recounting a conversation he had heard among Longboat Key firefighters. Former Fire Marshal Carol Mooneyhan told his colleagues about a van full of Middle Eastern-looking men pulling up to the colony's security gate early that morning and posing to be a news crew scheduled to interview President George W. Bush. Mooneyhan said the men were denied access, but days after the story appeared in the Observer, it mushroomed into talk about whether this alleged van and group of men actually were trying to assassinate Bush. That was just one of the bizarre events that occurred that day, and leading up to the attacks. Everyone on Longboat Observer in Greater Sarasota became stunned to learn in time about the many pieces of this story that involved Longboat Key, Sarasota, and Venice. Mastermind Muhammad Atta and his miserable band of terrorists had taken flying lessons at the Venice Municipal Airport. Some of them lived a while in Palmer Ranch, and some, Sullivan also learned, lived in one of the trailer parks on Longboat Key. There was more. Sullivan later learned from a server at the Longboat Key Holiday Inn that Atta and his cronies had dined there multiple times. Not sure whether to believe her, Sullivan took Walsh to meet the server so Walsh could hear her story firsthand. The young woman stood across the bar from them. I knew she was telling the truth, Walsh says now. Her hands were shaking. She told them that she saw Atta's photo on TV after the attacks and instantly recognized that he was the man she waited on. How could this be? Little, idyllic Longboat Key at the center of the international catastrophe? And on top of that, the Longboat Observer's executive director and city editor becoming momentary key figures in this unfolding mystery? Back in Walsh's office, the Secret Service agents didn't engage in any happy small talk. They were serious, Walsh says, in response to their question about where the Observer obtained this information on the van and trailer park. A nervous Walsh replied, "We're reporters, that's what we do." There was a tense moment of silence, and one of the agents cracked a slight smile and slapped his knee, as if to say, duh, we should have thought of that. But light moment didn't last. In so many words, Walsh remembers they asked us not to write any more stories. Walsh's reply, "I made no promises," I said. "If Shay finds out something more, that's what we do." They thanked her for her time. Walsh escorted them downstairs to the front door. 2 days later, they were back. Let's read this real quick. A great tradition, forevermore. We say we'll never forget. In the 20 years since that wrenching day, this is an appropriate time to give credit and heartfelt thanks to the Longboat Key Chamber of Commerce and for the Longboat Key Public Works staff for living up to that commitment, never letting us forget. Since September 11, 2002, and every year after, the Chamber and Public Works staff has placed 3,000 American flags representing those who died along Gulf of Mexico Drive. While they remind us of the senseless slaughters of precious innocent lives, the flags also remind us that we are Americans, and by God for them, we will never give up the fight and cause for freedoms. Okay, so that wasn't really related. That was just more to commemorate those who lost their lives in the tragedy. So, 2 days later, the Secret Service agents were back. This time they handed her a piece of paper with a phone number, a 202 Washington, D.C. area code, and asked her to call it between 8 and 9 p.m. "Who is this?" Walsh asked. They declined to say. Call the number. They will tell you whether the information about Carol Mooneyhan is accurate. For the rest of the day, Walsh felt a knot in her stomach. That night, she made the call. A man answered. "This is Lisa Walsh from the Longboat Observer. To whom am I speaking?" she asked. He would not say. All he said was, "The information about Carol Mooneyhan is not true." Walsh, thank you. She hung up. And that was it. Walsh remembers thinking moments afterwards, "I believe Shay. That guy lied to me." Today, Walsh says that the most exciting experience in her journalistic career. "I was scared to death." Looking back, this will be part of the rich lore of the Longboat Observer. How this little, blonde editor and curious, attentive young reporter played big roles in the chapter of 9/11 that started on Longboat Key. We will never forget.